Mr. Prashant Krishnan. Prashant is currently the Senior Director at Medtronic. He is an experienced business and thought leader in the medical device market with a demonstrated history of managing different business units across market segments in India as well as USA. He was earlier working as director with Johnson & Johnson. Prashant is an alumnus of the Wharton School and Xavier Institute of Management. Prashant, in your illustrious career, you have successfully led many organizations through crisis globally. Can you share your key learnings which will help leaders to successfully lead during these uncertain times? And also, can you please elaborate on the impact of this crisis on medtech industry in the next 6 to 12 months? And your key takeaways for medtech leaders on how they can ensure their organizations can survive and thrive in this crisis, because we have seen the elective surgeries are almost down. We are unable to see any elective surgery happening, at least in the near future, and there is a major loss. And similarly, we see an opportunity of India emerging as next manufacturing hub, because we see a lot of challenges with China. So how can we accelerate that also? So overall, your view about the medtech industry. Over to you, Prashant.
Thanks, Gaurav. Longish question. Let me try and divide it into parts and then try and answer this. Let me start with where Puneet kind of left it, the vulnerability part of it. So let me share with you guys a story of how I kind of looked at April right after the first series of kind of messages on the lockdown. And this was pretty much the time where everybody was looking at what's going to be happening with absolute uncertainty, complete no clarity at all. And we are in medical devices, so our responsibility is to definitely go ahead and support surgeons, hospital infrastructure. And yet, how do you go ahead and tell your sales team to go out in the market in all of this uncertainty? And yet, what we did was, I can tell you about myself. I mean, the message that I sent to the team was that it is our responsibility. We are in healthcare. It is our responsibility. We have to go ahead and do it. I know the risks involved. We have to take all sorts of precautions and safety, but we have to get out there. Now, I sent this message to my team, and this message became a little viral across different other medical device companies. And this is pretty much vulnerability 101. I am not sure here with the situation. I've said this message across. What if things go really bad for some of my sales team members? And we are going ahead and taking this risk with people and families. Is it the right thing to do, or is it completely the wrong thing to do? But somewhere it's pretty much with what Amar started with. It's about the value system. If your core values are very clear, if you're going to be holding them very close to yourself and saying, this is our responsibility to patients, this is our responsibility to hospitals and surgeons, then you will go ahead and make those decisions. And I think that's one part of the piece that has been my big learning. If you actually ask me in terms of not just this pandemic, but even earlier crisis, this one clearly has articulated the need to really be resilient and go back to your core values to try and bring the best out of yourself and with your team. Now, let me give you a little bit of anecdote in terms of safety. Now, Gautam is on the panel. Gautam basically made sure that no hospitals allow any sales reps from medical devices companies to come inside. Now, welcome to the real world. You are basically telling your sales team, go out there, but the sales team is not going to go out to any hospitals. Now, what do you do in this particular case? Where do you send them to try and do these kind of interactions? Which is where you need to adapt. And this is absolutely the situation where you need to embrace how the challenges are. What do you need to do in a situation like this? How do you make sure that the reach out actually happens on a regular basis with the surgeons by the virtual methodology? If you're not going to be there to try and physically be there, definitely make sure the phone calls are being made on a regular basis. The request for whatever items will be required, products will be required, supplies will be required, are to be made. The reach out to the distributors to ensure that the last mile connectivity is done has to be kind of put in place. You can't just say, well, things are not working okay, let's just wait for how things will get better. It won't. I mean that's something that we learned very quickly as far as Medtronic is concerned. It is not going to get better very, very soon. The data points clearly told us that there is going to be a significant amount of challenge. While India actually was at the tail end of when the start actually happened, our learning out of what was happening in other parts of Asia was a lot more. That Korea, Japan had actually started much earlier, and they were already facing some of these issues. So the preparation is something that was important. The other area that I will talk about is in terms of data. Now, through this entire pandemic, another learning for senior leaders will be the focus on ensuring that data points which are collected are really analyzed and worked upon. So I'll give you an example. What we saw was between the metros and the non-metro cities, the bounce back is getting much faster than the metro cities. Now, tragedy being a lot of the salespeople are actually based out of the metro cities. That's the way that the productivity norms kind of force us with. But how do you create an opportunity for some of our coverage to actually get focused in the tier 2, tier 3 cities more? The reach out needs to happen. So rather than calling the same surgeon every day morning and saying what's happening new, how's the weather and how are things around? No. Identify what segments do you need to go after and then work from there on to really get better at what you can actually deliver to the customer. The other part, which I think is important, is in terms of developing trust. So we are now at a stage where we need to get the patients to have trust in the hospitals, that going to a hospital will not expose you to more infection. There is a lot of work that the hospital infrastructure teams, including different hospital infrastructures, getting created to provide safe and effective surgical treatments. And that's the role that we will need to play. And I've been a proponent of the fact that we call our entire team in med devices as sales consultants. A lot of times we've forgotten a little bit of what a sales consultant is supposed to do. We end up just being salespeople. That's not what we need to do. Here is a perfect time where you need to take the learnings of what you're seeing in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and bring that knowledge to hospitals, to surgeons, to healthcare providers, to see what is the best in class that is being used elsewhere. What is it that you can do? So an example that Gautam talked about, teleconsulting. Now, the very interesting part is in a lot of the hospital structures that exist, go back to the smaller centers and smaller surgeons who are not associated with, let's say, the hospitals. How do you help them to start engaging with companies? And maybe it's not something which is related straight away to the company that I work for, but there are solutions that have already been created. Exposing people to those solutions is an important part of the piece. So being the consultant, not necessarily looking very narrow-minded at your product, your company, your business, looking at how you can actually help the ecosystem come out much stronger. That will be the other part of the learning. A couple of examples of how we've started adapting to it. Last week we just did this new product launch in this new normal, as we call it, where we had nearly 400 surgeons attending an excellent product that we've launched recently. Normal case, it would have actually been nearly 1/10 of the number of people with 10 times more budgets required to try and reach out. The fact is we were able to do it very, very effectively. And the pandemic has told us that maybe what we were trying to do and the kind of spends that we were making, some of the inefficiencies will need to go out. The inefficiencies which come along with force of habit, the culture, the methodologies, that this is the only way that it gets done, those need to go through a change. So we will have to learn and adapt and work with these new situations and really thrive in them. Because if you actually ask me, was it a better use of resources? I would say absolutely. What is the point of trying to do 10 events when you can actually possibly do one event and get the same message across to many, many more number of people? And that's the part of the piece that is important. Now, finally, I would say that my way going ahead will be that for most companies, this would be a time where we can definitely get a better understanding of how to utilize the resources, right? How to remove some of the inefficiencies that creep in from the good times where things can just be the way they are and you can afford to try and do this and that and all of those. We need to make sure that every dollar that you spend, every rupee that you spend is actually giving you a better bang for the buck. Also looking at margins. It's important definitely to try and look at the mix and the margins for companies, because rather than just chasing top lines, and top lines may not necessarily work out at least the next 12 to 18 month period, especially in talking about medtech companies. What you need to do is to really focus on what you can do with margins, remove some of the inefficiencies, channel margins, some of those areas which creep in, which can be cleaned out and can be improved on, will be an area to work on. And finally, in terms of using the time quite effectively to ensure that the team's skill levels, now that you have the bandwidth available, the skill levels, the knowledge levels, the value that you deliver to the end customer is something that can be worked upon. It's also a good time for a lot of the senior leaders who, I know sometimes some of us will say we are getting stuck with what is called webinaritis right now. So webinar after webinar after webinar, or issues, but this is a good opportunity. We're not doing as much travel. So if you're not doing as much travel, can we spend some time thinking about what India really needs, and what could be some of the ideas to really deliver quality healthcare across the Indian subcontinent? And that would be my request and my final comment as far as your question is concerned.
Thanks a lot, Prashant. And on the lighter side, I think the saving that you are making on the marketing budget for all the conferences, I was looking at Gautam and I was looking at Neeraj, that how can we spend that money on the some of the patients, I think. So maybe offline, you can discuss that. But I think this is the new way of doing things and we all are learning. And I think the agility that Gautam was talking about and now you are reinforcing, I think it is very important and critical for us. We all have to now adapt ourselves. But definitely there is a lot of opportunity to save. There were inefficiencies in the system, which we have clearly highlighted. And now I think in the new normal, we need to have new paradigms. So thanks a lot. And now we